gas barrel engine built down at Thetford in Norfolk is what we call an agriculture engine. And normally an agriculture engine is denoted by the use of the spoke flywheel on the side here. And all engines have a name. This one is called Saturn. Now when we talk about the steam era, it was a much short-lived era because it only started in 1860 with what we called the portable engines, which were not drivable. They were actually towed to a place of work and only had the boiler and the flywheel attached at the base on the fresh machine, and it was doing day's work. So by the time 1900 come along, they found that you had motive power with the world of steam. Over to you, David.
Yeah, no, I've been doing it for so many years, but I can never remember dates. This is one of the oldest engines on the field. 1891. Just think about that. In the era of Queen Victoria, this was built in Thetford. Mind you, over the years, it's probably had a new boiler and various other new bits every time. Rather like us, find new needs, get things added on, don't you? The nice thing is, it's worked, I spent most of his life, instead it was named Generation Cultural, and you said what that was all about. It worked in Norfolk, and I've got a note to say that it worked on the Crowley. Putting in the Crowley. Now, I didn't know that how. You can imagine what that would have done to the Wilson to that engine. I think that was probably towards the end of his life, but you can imagine one of those down on the beach with the wings out, telling in the Crowley. That's the way he did it. That was started in 1940, but it was great for preservation. Steve Foster's apparently has got that. Steve's got that. Masters of Gainesville.
Yeah, another one on the East Coast of England. It's interesting, David, but the majority of our engineering skills were all down around Norfolk, Lincoln and Gainsborough. And of course, when you look at Masters of Gainesborough, they were based down there in East Anglia. And when you look at this vehicle as a whole, when you look at this engine, it's got a canopy. Now you would be hard pressed to find two canopies the same because the job was so lowly paid that the driver and the fireman took to build their own canopy. So you actually don't find two canopies, but like then,
well, some of the old Avelings, they ended up with metal canopies that were sort of mass produced, but that one is a 3-speed engine. Now, just quickly about 3 speeds. You don't change gear like a car, you have to stop the engine and literally you use a lever and pull the gear from one gear to another. You can see us change gear into the comps on the side. And that's the Mansley family from Horham's got that. It's a very powerful engine, it's called Jet. But where did it come from? Yeah, Masters and Gainsborough, sure. Tasmania is where it worked. We exported engines all over the world. And that was all back in Tasmania, that one.
It must have been a shock to the farming industry to go from a horse to a mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable. But I just want to talk about the roller, because where I come from up in Stonehenge, my village was both the James and Cotswold civil engineers, and they were still rolling tarmac in 1966 when I was just 7. And of course I grew up on steam back in those days, and they had quite a fleet of road rollers. But let this showman's road locomotive go out the way a minute, and I'll come back to the Avelin. Now, of course, when you look at the front of the Avelin there, it's got the symbol of the galloping horse and the word Invicta. Now, if you go down to places like Margate, you can read the Invicta Times, which is the local newspaper. And of course, down there, the Invicta is the sign which then is famous for what the front is in Worcester David.
No, that's actually what we're talking on there. The new steam marshal got the job. Bruce Garrett, seriously. I just want to talk about this one, John, because this is Southern Creek. After being displayed by the crew at this truck, it's like a broom with 3 ends and 4 handles, because it started live like this. Now, we get the name traction engine, comes from tractor. This literally moving thing, traction. So this started off with what's called a tractor. In other words, just these wheels here, and it gives us all the job that it's like they're on the road, putting road stones for the county council in a trailer. They then decided that it would be more useful as a road roller. And so it was converted. Surrey County Council had it converted to a road roller. So look, you get these wheels, it looks just like the one behind. So that's the way it was when George got it, George Epic. He converted it back to tractor form, believe you me, as if you'll never believe that it's true, he couldn't get the wheels the right diameter for the front. So he filled it round with concrete, I'm thinking not, to make it the right size. And then, even though he decided that it was a bit of a shoulder, but he took the fairground order to the juvenile ride, so he wanted to convert it to a shoulder section. And that's the firm we've got it in today. So it's got all these fancy grass surfaces and a full-length canopy. But the important thing about this engine is at the front. It's covered up, as you go around, covered up with a tarpaulin. And it's a dynamo. Because in those days, we're talking early part of the 1900s, there wasn't electricity, and all these houses around here would be powered by paraffin or whatever, or gas. But if you wanted to see electricity, you went to the fairground, because an engine like this, with a flywheel, attached to that dynamo, would power the lights and the ride as well. So that's what the engine was used for. And it would tow 3 trailers on the road, and I steered this with my son, not all the way, because we had another elite crew, believe you me, but we steered this as far as Hadlow down to Chatham in that direction, and Hollycombe in Hampshire in the other direction, on the road.
Now, just the Edison Roller goes by there. The Edison Steamroller Company is one of those companies that had lots of crews out on road making, and these engines, the steamroller, would be going away to weeks on end towing a living van. In a living van, these guys would have to carry all their coal in the underslung compartments of the living van. The only thing they had to worry about on the road was getting water. And in those days, they would take their water from the drainage pit. And that's all they had to worry about. The coal, in those days, was cheap. It was still cheap, actually, by the ton. And the whole aspect of COVID, it was some 5 years ago. It was only 200 odd pounds a ton. Yeah. Now it's over 600 pounds a ton.
The last coal mine that was producing very well spoken driveway coal was closed down by the Welsh government a year ago. So we have some imported now from places like Colombia, and it's not such good quality. We're doing the exact opposite of what we want to do with these engines. We're making smoke because the coal's not very good. Seriously, there we are. Cool. Anyway, number 5 is one of the Fowler ploughing engines. Now, I've got to go round the other side. I'm going to explain all this because you've done this before. You know all about these. You look at this underneath there as it goes round. There's a big winch with a lot of cable, okay? So when we say ploughing engine, no, it didn't tow a plough because this weighs 20 tons. It would have flattened the field, not ploughed it up. So John Fowler, later Sir John Fowler, came up with the idea of having 2 engines, one at one end of the field and one at the other. With what we call the balance plough between. Now that's a bit difficult to describe, but it had 6 furrows, and when it got to one end, pulled it to one end, the plough would reverse, and the other engine would pull it back the other way. You move forward each time, and you're doing it once to 4 inch with a 4 or 5 man crew. But if you think about it, in those days, as John just said, going over the horses, with a bit of luck, a good horseman would plough an acre in a day. Walking behind a horse, imagine that about up 6 dozen miles, with a crew like this, on the fenlands, as you were talking about earlier, you could plough 20 acres in a day. So it was a revolution in farming.
Now these engines, you had a left-hand winder and a right-hand winder because they had to work in pairs at opposite ends of the field. The agricultural engine here was one of the 2 biggest engines that were ever made, the other one being the Viking Showman. And those were the 2 biggest engines that were in production. Now it's very interesting to see that traditional sign writers went to the job of actually signing the wheels. And of course the big striking that they did is all associated with what you see on the boiler boxes of some of the engines. So they went to the trouble of putting it on the wheels as well as on panels. And that was our separate job in itself. These are still on the metal wheels. Most of the taxi engines have been fitted with rubber. Some of these have been kind of for the roads, but kind of for the people that are driving them. These are on metal stripes, we call them basically just metal wheels. Now Bob brings this here on a low loader, but frankly, some of the roads down here, I think we're doing a bit good with this, not damaging them. I think they're already bad enough to here, but there we are. So this is politics. But I'm going down here to talk to the steer person who is Tina. Now, Tina, I always admire because this lady can drive and steer any vehicle on this field. It doesn't matter whether it's a 3-wheel car, motorbike. I've seen her with a 3-wheel
later depot lorry. This is one of the biggest engines on the field, and standing on the outside of it with a totally great big steering wheel, watching it go round. Now I've done one of these, it's quite a life actually, I'll tell you what, I thought it's on this. If that wheel spins round the 80 because the front wheel hits something, you could end up being thrown off. But not you. No, you're not going to do it. It's Boston. I have the pleasure of Boston's got a lovely Harrington coat as well. These are driving on the London Bright Run. She's my hero. She's brilliant. I'm sorry I wasn't talking about you the driver where it's like. I'm sorry to say this, sir, but I'm more attractive. No, but seriously, this is a magnificent machine owned by Bob Watson, and it's a team of which you'll remember they've done it like a beautiful job of restoring this engine. Well, we haven't got a pair this year because it's already without Sandringham, but Sandringham haven't had any excuse. I know we've got lots of excuses, to be honest, John.
Now when you talk about transportation on a low loader, pre-COVID that was around about £250. Now everything is £1,000. So these guys run over a ton of miles a weekend.
Probably got his own.
600, yeah.
He's got his own. Exactly. Oh, I know. It's R&D. You know those? Anyway, this is an engine which I've also got a little bit of history with this one.
Yeah, go for it,
And
mate.
I'll shut up. And seriously, this one's called Taxi. Gentleman runs Welsh landlord who was a big butcher at the five-man cabin. He finally decided to retire. And it's a lucky engine. My history with this engine is he's been on this rally field since the early days, not long. A long time when he was laid up, didn't it? And it's called Catholic. And when I first knew it, it was in the standard brown livery of Wellington Stephen. And it was owned by a couple called anyway, the people that my son came into the arena, I was with him at the time, and it was the first engine that he was ever on. And he came round in the arena, sitting in the corridor, and now by him we'll get him family, and it's in the livery. So most of them were standard livery, brown, but this is, put it back the original livery, the people that had it in Manchester. It was out of service for a very long time because they know by my next door neighbour, so I know the engine well, and then it disappeared, and you got it, and it come back on the rally field, and we were very pleased to see it today. But the big thing about it is it's an advance, it's called the advance though, it's totally different. Wherever the changes at the steering change, your credit is done with a Roman quadrant here. And what about the cylinders? It's a G-Flex compound. We are giving you a lot of technical information now, but it's quite different to all the other engines. It was built for doing the then modern asphalt roads as opposed to tar macadam. And you didn't want to stop on that because you left the bump in the road. But this one has the facility that you can literally throw it from forward into reverse without stopping. That was great. And the water isn't in the tender, it's in the standing tank or carrier tank alongside, so the weight displacement is evenly done between the front and the back. A marvellous design that came along quite late. These were built up into the 1930s. Yeah, okay, so I've gone on about it long enough, but that's all right. What I just do.
Yeah, Robertson Stevens is one of the country based in Mason, so there was a handful of manufacturers that were based in Lang. Some were indeed Robertson Stevens, Basingstoke, doing passengers down at Andover. Other than that, they're all on the east coast of England.
It's going to do a demonstration of trying it from forward into reverse. Yeah, I see. It's a stop.
Now, of course, if that's a slide wheel today, you couldn't do that. You could have got an 8-cylinder slide wheel. We've got
No drivers, exactly, good good. Look at that there, Dave. You're in the room to deliver this. Stop doing it. You're in the room to deliver this. Look at the right. the tender on the back, sticking right out behind. That's because it was an Australian engine. It went out to Australia. So you couldn't get the coal in the middle of the outback, but you couldn't get timber. So they used to run that on timber, mind you, got through a lot of timber running and things like that. And it was used on the road train. They still do road trains in Australia now, lorries, umpteen trailers, miles and miles of the outback. In those days it was done with traction engines. The best thing of it on that is the heat to track them down. But on a hot day in Australia, on the foot brake, riding with 3 trailers behind, loaded up with iron ore, something like that. Amazing.
So with this one there, David, behind you, and the one with the next bit behind you is the small road locomotive,
That was mine, Will. The first one that George had, he bought it off the forestry people in the middle of the war, to use on his farm.
Very nice size, weren't they?
It wasn't hell, a lot of use on the farm, but he always wanted a steam engine.
But it did what it did. It's very trailer, loaded stuff on the farm,
Exactly.
and that was the important aspect.
But it's what they call a light tractor, under 5 tons. And the big advantage of that was you didn't have to have a driver and steersperson. So you save 50% on your wages. So everybody turned to making the light tractor, but that's called a gold medal tractor because the RAC did trials. And they tried, this was trials for road vehicles and steam engines, and in its class, it outclassed all the other steam engines in terms of reliability and certainly fuel consumption on this long run around the country they did, and it got the gold medal. So I was very proudly elected as the gold medal tractor. Didn't I help sell it?
So the Langston engine here, I think it was an engine, was it again? No.
The caster.
It is a caster, Andover, you see, just that way for me. And yeah, caster's Andover, they eventually became operating out of Walter's Works, I think, and eventually became a train or something, called Andover Train. Yeah. But they were nice size engines though, weren't they, David? You know,
Another 3-speed light engine.
yeah, another lightweight.
But the big thing about this is this chain drive. Mostly this is a direct gear drive, and we talked about how when we change the gear, but this is driven, it's a gear drive. Now we always say, we wonder why this didn't catch on, because these gears, if you think about it, you've got your gears and they were in constant mesh. So you couldn't have any like independent suspension because the gears are just come out of mesh. So they did a chain drive, and this has got that mesh as a rear wheel, it's got suspension. Now I would have thought that was a good idea, but strangely enough they didn't sell too many of them. And it's a nipping engine because, wow, wait for it, 15 miles an hour on the road.
Also, a used engine with the wing on the near side wheel, you see. A lot of engines, they put these wings on that side, and used them in forestry, wings and trees, up through the forest and stuff. So, yeah, they're a very useful vehicle in itself, because that use of the flywheel would have driven a saw bench in a forestry application. You know,
I also was told that if there's a more than one trailer, and you've got steep hills like they call them, you put this at the top of the hill, cut the wheels, and tow the trailer up the hill. I know it sounds laborious, but there we are. How's it impossible, isn't it? Because it's not a steam engine. Whoa, wrong. You're cheating. It's a diesel roller. I mean, the head of the horse is... I think the godfather has been at this one because the horse on the front lost his head. It's called Thunderbird because it sounds like thunder when it's going. Listen to it. Single part engine. It was an experiment. This is taken out from Hando down as part of the Touristic collection and Ross says he did it in record time, Hando down, what, about 10 miles, 4 hours. Took 4 hours to get it out. It's enabling. But it was built right back to the beginning of the century of the experimental. And you know how they started? Well, a hell of a job on the engine started because that's the code. See that big cylinder on the top, John? It's compressed air. Very high pressure compressed air. And that's what gets that cylinder going in the first place. The charge from that. It's amazing, really. Good thinking, but they carried on. I mean, Hellingly then became Hellingly Barman, and they carried on building diesel rollers right up in the 70s.
you made a point earlier on about mentioning how it was labour intensive for the steamwork. And of course that is when the tractor came along about 1907 with Henry Ford engineer on tractor, only needed one person to drive it. So the steam days started to decline as fast as what they appeared. And it was down to the fact that it was labour intensive, you needed a steerman, you needed a foreman there, and at the end of the day, the tractors really took it. The tractors became more popular, they were cheaper, farmers sort of buying, and the steam days covered.
1922 that was built, but we were carrying on, you're quite right about steam engines, but we carried on building them into the 1930s with the oil and steam. So that's an early. Stage again. Fire nightmare. Yeah, this lovely big town of road locomotive, compound engine. What does that mean? Well, you want to know? Yeah, I'll tell you. There's two cylinders, a high pressure and a low pressure. So you start off with the steam in the high pressure. Now, normally what happens then, the steam's used up, goes out the chimney. But so you're wasting a lot of your power. So you come up with the compound engine, so the high pressure instead of just exhausting steam through the chimney, it goes to the low pressure, and you have a second go at it. So it's a much more economical use of the steam. And this has got a big history. It's called a nightmare because it has been over the years, hasn't it, Roy? You've had a bit of trouble with it over the years. And it is loose on the back. I thought, give it a different hair colour or something. When I was doing going around, I thought Roy had picked himself on another lady like that. Because if he did, you go back to town, and if he did. I know, yeah. Look at this. You get a whole family. They used to go around, and I promise you I won't be too rude, but you used to have a big sign on the back, "Don't buy front door big in it." Because it sticks out a mile, because it was used for carrying wood. Okay, so that's the problem with it. The least of the problem, breaking axles. I won't go into where it was. It was in the middle of a town, and we imagine getting the wheels off this. Look, they're taller than I am. And getting the axle out and having to rebuild it. Now that is a job and a half. Yeah, that's just one thing though. You've had some problems with it over the years. One way or another, Reddy's a fantastic engine and we're always pleased to see it. Thanks very much for bringing it, boys. Yeah.
Oh, David, one thing we've not mentioned is the use of the stove box on the front of an engine like this. You can actually cook a meal in the stove box of an engine, but you can't do it on a road roller. You talk about how you can cook a dinner in a stove box on a front of an engine. Once you're on the road roller,
this is great luck with Cestia. Now, we still have to finish the lighting on this because Greg is actually the leader of the steam group up at Finchley Park. Now, Greg won't mind me saying this, but he first came on as a volunteer when he was about 12 or 13, and he was an early teenager, and he was a right stroppy bloke then. Hasn't changed, he's still stroppy, but never but he came to the apprenticeship scheme, and he's with us now, and he's now in charge of the steam group at Finchley Park. And he's rebuilt, alright, he's had a new boiler, which has to be done professionally by a boiler maker because there's 180 pounds worth of steam pressure in there. If anything goes wrong with that, we're all gone. But it won't, because it's got a certificate that's it's tested very rigorously every year and gets a certificate, so not to worry. But all the rest of it, most of it, with hit a bit for this record, you've rebuilt it, coming out in its second year, single-handedly. I don't know what, you must have gone without food for weeks on it, because I don't expect these things are to run. Well done, Greg.
One thing I was just mentioning about Sentinel, there were some good manufacturers out there for steam lorries. One was this one Sentinel, the other being Spoken. Now, Sentinel, when you bought this one here, it's supposed to be electric work, and it's supposed to be electric, and then you go to an afterway. And the bloody upgrade was from the Sentinel man. And of course that was always the thing with an owner, when you bought a new one of these, you went and had your photos taken before you drove it out the factory. And that factory is still there in Shrewsbury. Sentinel was the Shrewsbury company, and it's still there. So it's a bit of quality to build on that place. There's no danger of that.
Fantastic, but you might look at this and say, what's the steam engine with pneumatic tyres? But quite correct, because it wasn't built until 1934, by which time diesel lines had come in, but at that time, these were by far the superior engines in terms of performance to a diesel lorry. This has got two steam engines on it because it's one of only a fairly small number of the vehicles built to be used as different tractors. So you've got the steam engine, but what the turbo, because that in there is like an oven on any day, a minor hot day. And it's a vertical boiler. All the others have got a horizontal boiler like Thomas tank engine if you like. These are vertical boilers. The engine, the cylinders and everything underneath. And then at the back here is another engine with powers of wind. And as you go around you see it's got this big metal slab that goes down to the ground. We've done towing demonstrations or logging demonstrations before with this. You put that down so it won't pull the engine backwards and you pull a log weighing several tons over muddy ground out of a forest using that weight. And the idea of that is, otherwise the log would end up pulling the engine. You put that down in the ground and the engine is pulled backwards and sinks into the ground. Very powerful weight. And so the witnessman has to stand next to it working. We've often given demonstrations over here. I don't think we're going to be able to do it. We might do it tomorrow, but I haven't got time today of the power of this wind thing. But there's only a few left. I think there's one of 4 each done, can't be even less than that in existence in the country. So we're pretty good at it now. Here's called Jupiter and part of the Claude Jeffrey collection. Still famous one used to belong to the Virgin family in royalty.
All three big and simple the tent on the purpose being installation or station will do it down in one
Not the notes, because I've been doing it for all many years and I can never remember the years of build. I never know. People like to know how old it is. And this was built in 1909. Well over 100 years old. It went to a scrapyard in 1976 and it was rescued from Hardwick Scrapyard by John Mortimer. Currently owned by Bob Watts, who also owns the growing engine. A regular performer on the Southern Rally Field in royalty. We're pleased to see here again. Lady Margaret, I think this one is.
Now it's worth mentioning, but the seats, for whatever reason, had 3 or 4 very sort of impressive things forward. The first one was during World War I. There was a shortage of fuel, so the seats came to the front. Second World War II, and then a big shot in 1952 with the Jewish fighting.
We had to get the steam makers back. We couldn't get the oil. The steam makers put a lot of paper on and other big companies put them back in service.
And there was 8,900 in Hogwarts, yeah. And there were 400 in 1956. But then, pretty simple, it's on all sorts of lights and low. Then we've got a good example here of the talking 4-inch, 6-inch, sorry, but 6-inch represents half size, 4-inch represents one-third size, and 3-inch represents a quarter size. So Foden went on to become Edward Richard Foden, Richard ERS, and this is a very good example of a Foden steam lorry. Now bear in mind, these lorries used to go along in full-size form at about 22 miles an hour. Now these guys, if they towed a trailer, they would not only have to commission the engine in the morning for a day's work, they'd probably have to load the vehicle itself, they'd have to decommission it in the evening, and it wasn't an 8-hour day, it wasn't a 10-hour day, it was actually a 17-hour day due to work. And the money wasn't as good, and of course it was long, arduous effort. Anyway, the other engine we've got here is the garage traction engine. Now, of course, the agricultural engine in full-size form, that's flywheel, is what earns the money. Now, bear in mind that farmers, if they had fresh on the field, they didn't always own an engine, they called it contractors who was doing work using the flywheel and plough the land, they use fresh machines in a forestry application, it was run a saw engine. So you've got a very interesting example of miniatures here today. So like I say, miniature one is a complete
how's it going? Yeah, it's going alright. Got a bit fed up with the fence post getting into my vision, so might bring a tripod next time to set it up. Yeah. It's even telling me what I'm 4K, 60 frames per second, rock steady wide.